launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Space Monkeys! Blasting off with Peter Mauric at last. He's the head of public affairs at Parity and a senior advisor to the Web3 Foundation right now. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for
Excited
having me.
to be here.
Yes, it's a very, very lovely office you have here.
Thank you very much.
It's meticulously designed and laid out. Who sets this all up?
I moonlight as a interior designer, but only for friends and family. I can't be bought.
Is this something that you've been working on for many years, or is
my
this a
mother's
natural talent?
Yeah, my mother's a designer and an artist, runs in the family, so I just sort of like gained this eye through osmosis growing up. And it's an enjoyable hobby.
Yeah.
An expensive hobby, but
Right.
an enjoyable one nonetheless.
Well, it's enjoyable to be here. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
My therapy chair.
Yeah.
You're the therapist today.
Well, you know what? There's a lot to talk about. Maybe a lot to get off our chest. We are just going through the FTX meltdown.
The date today is November. It's the day
11th.
of Moonbeam Illuminate. I'm going to be on a panel in about an hour and a half, so
Radical.
we've got the set up, ready to go. I think I'm just going to do it from here.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, they'll love that.
Yeah.
But FTX is melting down.
Yep.
Who knows what else is to follow?
Filed Chapter 11 this morning. That was the news, like basically an hour ago.
Crazy.
But I might know a little bit more than most people about the things that have gone wrong. Not necessarily within FTX, but just like how to operate and how to assess the legitimacy and honesty of people operating in crypto. It's like being in crypto for 5, 6, 7 years, you learn this, right? Sam and his crew have been around for 2, 3 years.
Right.
Came in acting as though they knew everything. That's a red flag. I think I can attribute that to Jesse from Kraken, but 100% agree.
Yeah.
And it was an observation that I had along the way also. It was like, where did this guy come from? And why is everyone fawning over him left and right?
So you've been in crypto for 5 or 6 years.
Full time since early 2018, but before that, like many people, I was running around New York after work, doing meetups.
Where we are today versus the expectations you had
Yeah.
back then. Were you hopeful back then? Is this what you expected?
It was around when Gav first started writing about our fearless libertarian leader, started writing about the concept of Web 3.0. I don't think I'd actually read that blog post, but I had followed the Ethereum launch pretty closely from my political consulting desk here in New York City back then.
Okay.
So in between helping pass medical marijuana reform, working on a lot of energy projects, natural gas, renewables, a lot of offshore wind work back in the day that just recently is getting built off Long Island here in New York. I was like digesting as much of the crypto world as I possibly could.
Crazy.
I started an internal newsletter at that firm about crypto. We were relatively close to Ben Lawsky, who had recently put BitLicense into effect in New York, which will go down in infamy as probably one of the most boneheaded pieces of regulation ever passed that put New York decades behind in terms of being a crypto hotspot. But nonetheless, I'm still here. The crypto scene is still here. And my hope, going back to your original question back then, was like, I lived through the financial crisis in '08 in college and coming out into a career. The prospects looked bleak and distrust in the financial system and the banks was at an all-time high.
Right.
So I was always interested and on the lookout for better solutions to that financial distrust, this distrust we had in the way the financial system was run.
Yeah.
And then obviously when I read about Web3 and all this, the data privacy, Snowden revelations happened over those years, that scope in my mind expanded, and my hope for crypto and blockchain to be able to solve bigger societal issues that root themselves in the internet also became really an exciting concept to me. Now, have my expectations been met yet? No.
Right.
I think this industry got way too enamored in the shilling and the pumping and the
speculation
the
use
Lambos,
case.
right?
Yeah.
Which people like Sam and CZ and Brian Armstrong to an extent, but less so, I'd say, with Brian and Jesse at Kraken, who I think have a little bit more ideological focus than investment focus. They've pushed this industry to a place where it's so much about speculation. No one actually understands what half these tokens do. There's a complete redirection and focus from decentralization, which is the most important piece of all of this. It is the only means to the end, which is a disintermediated financial system, which is a disintermediated global communications network in Web 3.0 in a better, freer internet. When you come into this industry and your best business idea is to start a prop trading shop and then an exchange where you are using customer funds to take equity investments in projects in a preferred ecosystem, and then immediately launching like options and perps for that investment on the exchange you own to then dump the tokens on the people that you sold them to in the first place, or the retail that couldn't get to them in the first place, all under the guise of like, I'm going to use this money to do good in the world.
Yeah.
Like this is not good for the industry and does not reinforce my hope for what this industry would become.
Right. And that regulatory hammer is coming down. What's crazy about this FTX situation is like 2 weeks ago, we were all upset because Sam was talking about regulations, right? Like the good boy of the regulators. And now like we've forgotten that story, but we know regulations coming. Yeah. What do you think about the regulatory landscape for crypto?
Right. Well, with Sam, and I come from politics, I do a lot of regulatory advisory work, obviously for Web3 Foundation, in regard to Polkadot specifically, but also broadly people who want to start to assess the risks of different paths in building their own projects. And then obviously going back to my old job in politics, it wasn't just financial regulators. I was dealing with environmental regulators, energy regulators. So like a decent amount of experience and understanding on like how to work with these people. And I've seen a lot of people try to use the regulatory process purely to their advantage. So in Sam's case, the last big lobbying push that he was making was for a bill that would have preferenced sort of centralized DeFi, CeFi, or whatever you want to call it, which I think is an absolute shitty term. This might be the first time I've ever actually said it because I hate it so much. Privilege that and make DeFi harder to do, which would have put him in a central position of power, because in a CeFi world, the exchanges are the regulated front door to the financial products. It's literally a bank. Yeah. You need to get a banking license, and that's an example in the regulatory world of a monopolist trying to use the regulatory process and system to pull the ladder up behind them after they make their bank. Right. Man. Yeah. It was in the name the whole time, dude.
Okay, so do you think there's other illegal activity happening in the... What sort of illegal activity are you seeing from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, and maybe we can... This isn't always as obvious at first glance when you're coming into a new industry or a new industry is getting set up. I mean, as you know, and many people know, we've been working very closely with the SEC for over 3 years now to understand what we should and shouldn't do, to understand what the ramifications of issuing a token are, and what the right process is in order to ensure that you do things the right way, that you're transparent and honest about your intentions with this thing that you're launching and this token that you're issuing, and then a process to then say, all right, we've accomplished the steps necessary to ensure that we're decentralized, that we are not in a central, meaning we are not the party that issued the token originally, are not in a control position of the network, and all these other things that go along with that to ensure that you are not basically building a little fiefdom empire monopoly within this thing that you're launching, which makes it a security, right? If you are a labs company at the center of a network that you've launched with a token on it, and you are taking equity or token investments in projects building on your network, building on your chain, or even building on your cluster of smart contracts. So let's say you launch a DEX on Ethereum that's very popular, and you raise a lot of money, and then you go launch a venture arm to invest in projects that are using that underlying DEX to build a project on top. That's illegal. Right? And we saw a ton of that with Sam in the various networks that he supported, and that's all going to need to come to an end. We have not taken equity investments or token investments in projects building on Polkadot. We do not have a venture arm.
When you say we, you're talking about Web3 Foundation?
Web3 Foundation and Parity Technologies. We do not have a venture arm. It's crucially important that any company that issue a token, even after they say it has potentially morphed, this legal term, morphed from a security to a commodity, during that time and even after, you need to operate like you're a publicly traded company. You need to have internal controls on buying and selling and reporting that internally. It doesn't need to be publicly reported necessarily, but you need internal controls on employee buying and selling. Like they need to notify either your manager or some committee internally. It's not asking for permission, but just notification that it's that you're making a large buy or sale.
So they can check if they ever want to, right?
Right. Educating employees on like the correct course of action and what is the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. So this concept of material non-public information, this is a well-known concept within a publicly traded company, but within a crypto startup, you say that to anyone from potentially a founder down to a support dev, they might not know what that means, right? And in crypto, sometimes we call this like alpha, like you got the alphas, like people who work for a company that issued a token who are pumping out alpha all the time, like unknown things about like launch dates of things or integrations or even teasing them, like big announcement coming or something like that, is freaking illegal. And like that's like so obvious, but like even then, people in this industry seem to just flaunt those rules. So we spent a lot of time, money, a lot of calls with lawyers that I spent, untold weeks of my life on calls with regulatory and securities lawyers, understanding all this, building a plan for the Web3 Foundation and Parity to educate investor relations teams that were able to respond to dot holders the same way that a publicly traded company's investor relations teams would. Special communications team or sort of working group within Parity and Web3 as news that was consisting material non-public information was going to come out, that we ensured that release process was clean, that people who didn't need to know that it was going out weren't unnecessarily notified, so that it was just like the smallest possible group putting this news out to keep it secure and confidential if necessary until it went live. These are all things that companies need to think about when they're launching a token, and the argument that this is going to stifle innovation or that this means that only the best capitalized companies are going to be able to launch products. One, I would say it's not true. It's not going to stifle innovation. We have, as Polkadot, Parity, Web3, done a lot of work and spent a lot of money blazing this path so that others can follow in our trail and hopefully expend fewer of their own resources to get to the same outcome. So come and talk to us. We're happy to discuss how we engage with the SEC and the steps that a project might want to take in engaging with FinHub to say come in and say is like, we're issuing a security. All tokens are securities until they morph, and we want to do it the right way. We're gonna be in regular conversation with you about each step, and we're generally speaking, unless told otherwise, going to follow the process that Polkadot took to launch our network, decentralize it, distribute the token, turn on governance, and then after those steps are completed, as with Polkadot, we will operate confidently, knowing that we have morphed from a security to a commodity. And then at that point, likely register with the CFTC, and operate that way, like Bitcoin.
Okay, so the SEC invited the crypto world to come and speak to them,
Yes,
right?
and everyone said no except for
Right.
us.
In the very beginning, I assume that more people are talking with the SEC these days.
Not really. I think Gensler, Chairman Gensler, said a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember if it was an interview or some congressional testimony, that a total of 6 companies have ever or are or have ever really come on their own accord to the SEC to talk as it was invited.
Okay.
The vast majority of the companies that are dealing with the SEC are dealing with the enforcement division.
Right.
That's a lot more. That's not that 6, although some of them may be dealing with enforcement or Corp Fin. I'm not actually sure the number of companies that have actively engaged with FinHub. Those newly created division. It's a working group. It's like division, I guess you could say, within the SEC that has been tasked with managing this specific issue. I'm not exactly sure how many companies or protocols are actively in conversations with FinHub and who are in active conversations with FinHub because they made the cognizant decision from an early date in their development to go in and say, we're issuing a security, we want to talk to you about it and how we morph this from a security to a commodity. We might be the only ones.
Interesting.
I haven't heard anything else. So most protocols, most people in crypto that deal with the SEC, when they talk about dealing with the SEC, they're dealing with enforcement, and that's not a good thing when you end up dealing with enforcement.
So Web3 Foundation came out with this article a couple weeks ago, and they're claiming
1 week ago today.
Okay. But they're claiming that they've morphed.
Yes.
They've done this morphing process.
Yes.
Got a little bit of flack because people were saying anybody can just say they're not a security. Do you have any insight of why the Web3 Foundation released this article?
We went through this whole process, and we can confidently say that we have morphed from a security to a commodity. We have presented a strong legal theory to the experts at the SEC and have not heard otherwise. You know what I mean? We have presented our case and have not been told that we're wrong in any of the points in the process and any of the steps that we took. And part of that is because every step of the way, we said, we're planning on doing this. Is this okay? Should we adjust it? Oh, you would like, us to rethink this part of it, or this is good, right? It's consistent conversation and feedback. It's not that hard. It can be a weekly conversation, building up a rapport as you're launching this network. It goes a long way, right? At the end of the day, these are humans and human relationships and trust that does need to build up.
Yeah.
To the point where we can confidently say that we are not worried about an SEC enforcement and that we are going to operate going forward with the clear understanding that DOT is no longer security, and we are going to operate as such. On top of that, because we have this confidence and we've put these resources into understanding what the process is, working with the SEC, we have insight now into what a project needs to do to be safe, and we want to help other projects in the industry do what we did so that they can also operate safely,
right,
with a good relationship with the SEC. We want to have a good relationship with regulators, and I'm saying that for real, not the way Sam was saying it, which is I want a good relationship with regulators so that I can force all this financial activity onto my platform.
Right.
We're not pulling up the ladder behind us after getting this, right? We could say, we're no longer a security, fuck everyone else,
right,
woohoo. We're going to do a lot of work over the next couple months in the broader crypto ecosystem, in addition to the Polkadot ecosystem, to educate everyone on what we did, convince a lot of these crypto lawyers who have been maybe advising their clients to do other things,
right,
that they're not going to lose all their business and that they're not going to go to jail for what they did all over this time. But the concept of morphing is real. We did it, and DOT is now the only crypto asset other than Bitcoin that publicly traded companies can hold on their balance sheet because it is safely a commodity.
You are inviting other projects to follow you as long as they haven't bungled it up hardcore already, right?
Yeah,
some projects might have tripped already.
It's rough for some of the more established networks in crypto, right? So there's some crucially important elements to being able to morph from a security, meaning there's a central control or at very least an entity that has undue influence over the development of the technology of the network, in order to viably hand that over to the token holders, you need on-chain governance. And it can't just be signaling through something like Snapshot and then like the core dev group says, oh, we're going to do what Snapshot says.
Yeah.
Not going to work.
Yeah.
The code needs to be on-chain. The code needs to be voted on and then autonomously executed on-chain, like with Polkadot governance.
Right.
The only other network in the world that has something close is Tezos, but it's not quite the same. And they obviously haven't gone through the same process that we have with the SEC.
Right.
For networks like Ethereum and Solana and Cosmos, where the core development of the network is more or less run by like a lab or a foundation group, whether it's the Geth team or like the Ethereum research team that proposes most of the core upgrades to Ethereum, or, you know, writes and audits the staking contract for ETH2 and then just magically lets it out there and like, oh, we didn't launch it. Yeah, it's all hand-wavy bullshit. Solana's governance model is literally Solana Labs decides what's next. It says it on the website.
Right.
That's not viable. And in order, you can't really retrofit autonomously executing on-chain governance to those protocols in order for them to say, now the community of token holders has the power over the network on how decisions are made and how upgrades, like down to the code, are executed.
This is huge for the Polkadot network, especially because,
like I said, we're not pulling up the ladder behind us,
Yeah.
but there are significant technological and ideological necessities built in there, right? So like being anti-on-chain governance in the Ethereum world, I say the whole Ethereum world isn't anti-on-chain governance, but
Right.
Vitalik is, and what he says goes, which should tell you all you need to know about Ethereum governance.
Yeah.
That's not a viable decentralization strategy. And to be completely frank, I think the main reason that Ethereum core early community members are very anti-on-chain governance is because one or two people own 40+% of all ETH. So they know governance can never be fair. And that's another piece that goes into ensuring that your token is no longer security and being able to morph. You need to prove that your distribution was not ridiculously unfair towards a founder or a specific small group of people, right? Like, we can prove that the largest holder of DOT at any one point was Polychain at 5 or 6%, and then they've sold down over time to, I think, 4 or 5%, but or less, but still Polychain's largest holding, but they're the largest holder at a single-digit percentages, and that was a choice that was made early on to not allow anyone to own so much of this network that they would have control. In Ethereum, the Nakamoto coefficient is like 1 or 2. Theoretically, one person has enough control over 33+% of the stake
Yeah.
to censor transactions on Ethereum. One guy, right? The Nakamoto coefficient for Polkadot is 100, right? It is the most decentralized network in crypto. These are all things that you need to actually prove in this process in order for you to have the confidence that you're not going to be dealing with an enforcement later on from the SEC or any other securities regulator globally.
I love Polkadot.
Yeah, me too.
So every step of the way,
The long road is harder, but the outcome is hopefully better for the broader crypto ecosystem, and better aligned with the values that I got into this for.
and every step of the way of that longer road, you've been communicating with the SEC, and they've been saying, "Yeah, you're morphing."
Not quite, right?
Okay.
These are lawyers. These are regulatory lawyers. We've ongoing conversation through all these steps. It wasn't as though we were like asking every day, like, did we morph yet? Did we morph yet? Did we morph yet? Like, not going to work that way. Slow and steady process, regular meetings. Some weeks or months, there was very little to update on. It would just be a general update on what we've been doing, the state of the network, validator distribution sort of stuff. Some weeks it was very, very intense back and forth, right? Like, we're burning the pseudo key now. We're disabling or enabling balance transfers. We're turning on governance, right? Like these
Right.
were like concrete steps where we're like very much keeping a very open line of communication and understanding about what we were doing to take these steps to decentralize the network. So it really is about having a open, honest conversation back and forth about each step in this process.
And we've seen a lot of parachains follow a similar road as well.
Right. So this is the benefit, I think, now and parachain teams didn't know this before, right? This is all very sort of top secret work. You can't really go and blab about talking to regulators all the time. It's like you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and you don't want to negatively impact, loose lips sink ships, as they say.
Right.
So for existing parachain teams, this is like, oh wow, this is really great news. There's obviously some variation on the launch process that parachains took, or the steps to like turn on governance now versus later, or balance transfers now versus later. I'm not saying that the path that we took is the only path to morphing, but we've proven that you can get to the goal, right? Some of these parachain teams might take slightly different routes, but the key is the tools and the underlying technology that accomplished that journey, the car that made it to the destination, is Polkadot, and is the underlying technology, is substrate. It is proven to be capable of taking you to where you want to go.
Gotcha.
In a securities regulation and technical, but from a securities a regulatory standpoint. So you might swap out the exhaust or like put new tires on.
Right.
There's not just one path, but we've proven you can make it.
Could we ever make a UE, with governance? Could on-chain governance kind of undo all of this work by, becoming like a shill factory or something like that?
That is a great question, and I think the answer is yes for anything. I think even and not even talking about crypto companies, right? So no action letters or things that happen in the securities world outside of crypto, and they are, generally speaking, based on the observed behavior and status of that company and their operations. You can't, the moment you have that in hand, turn around and like become a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
You will have violated the understanding in that letter.
Yeah.
And it's not like I shouldn't say it's not a legally binding document, because I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a lawyer.
It's not like an immunity.
But it's
forever.
not. It's not a get out of jail free card if you break the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for now, this is very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Polkadot finding its footing and finding respect from builders across the space and retail users.
Sure.
How does this look going forward? How does Polkadot gain more adoption and get more attention that it maybe rightfully deserves?
So,
what do you see there?
I've got some news on that, actually. So I'm planning on launching a... You know what? Cut that entire last section, or
Which
at
part?
least...
The part about you and Polka House opening the...
Let's just go from the top.
No, come on. What do you want to cut about it? That's such good stuff.
If you beep everyone's name that I mentioned and just the context in between, so it's like
no.
Anytime I name an entity or person, just go beep and then you can keep it.
No way, we can't do that. Can we? Maybe we could release it later as like a second episode
In 5 years.
No, in January.
January 2027.
Come on, I want to tell everybody about your new thing that you talked about. Maybe we can talk and release it later.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
we can. It's going to be in January, so if I see you again before then, maybe we can re-record it.
Okay.
Or, heavily edited. Just like, can you do the robot thing with my voice? Raw.
We'll just put you in
Put
darkness.
it in the darkness.
Yeah, sure.
Then you can do it.
Okay, sounds good.
This is awesome.
Dude, it was awesome, man. I can't wait for next year, 2024. This is what we've been building up toward, and when you were talking about that, my heart was literally like racing. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And thanks for all the work
course.
you've done on the regulatory front, and really exciting to hear your thoughts.
It was difficult, and without being self-congratulatory. Lawyers and regulators, it's thankless for a lot of the process because it's all in secret. You can't tell anyone what you're doing, and then there's also so much uncertainty on the other side. So excited to be able to talk about it more. And broadly speaking, like, this is great news for Polkadot, great news for parachains, but also great news for crypto. Like, we have proven there's a path with regulators under the existing laws to get this done.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining us and talking with us today. Hope to see you soon.
Happy to.
All right.
Be back
Peace, buddy.
soon.